For 14 years, he's held the office of mayor in Newport News. And this June, Joe Frank plans to retire. Tonight, we'll talk with this prominent Peninsula leader about his legacy in Hampton Roads. This is What Matters. Good evening, I'm Cathy Lewis. With 14 years as mayor of Newport News, you know Joe Frank has some stories to tell. And tonight we hope he'll tell them here on What Matters. But to really know a person, it's helpful to hear from those around him. So first we bring you some thoughts from some of the people who've worked closely with Mayor Frank over the years. We start with Norfolk Mayor Paul Frame.
I think clearly Joe has been the voice of reason in the region for many, many years. He's got a very sharp intellect. He's got great leadership abilities. Joe was normally calm and collected. I don't know that I've ever really seen him excited or angry or express emotions. I mean, he's really a very thoughtful guy. I really do not know what we're going to do without him. I mean, there have just been a number of regional groups and I mentioned the Hampton Roads Partnership, that we have worked on together. I'll be frank, Joe is really very often, I mean, the intellectual power behind these organizations. He's just been a great guy to collaborate with.
I always remember Joe Frank, not just one instance, but many instances that in every one of the regional boards or meetings or committees that we've served on, Joe Frank is always the best prepared for that meeting. He has always done his homework, he's always thought about the topics, he's always done the background reading, and he raises important issues at every meeting. He has always, every time I've seen him or every action he's taken, demonstrated his real commitment to the City of Newport News. But I think as importantly is that he is one of the public officials in Hampton Roads who is really committed to our region. Joe Frank understands that the localities in Hampton Roads are really interdependent upon one another and that we either succeed or we fail together.
I think that Joe really tries to look at all angles to a problem and tries to give us good, solid solutions. He's one of the more future-thinking individuals that I've run into and probably understands the regional aspect of our area that we live better than the majority of the people that we run into.
Joe Frank has been a really an articulate voice for improving transportation, for talking about what projects would make some sense and how to fund them.
In making a decision to support high-speed rail to the south side and recognizing the initiatives that are involved in that and doing a good job of pulling some concepts together. Joe's done an excellent job of helping us get it to where it is today.
His voice, not being around the regional table, is a big loss for all of us, and that I hope he'll continue to be engaged and involved.
Job well done. Joe is a very dedicated individual, has a great deal of depth and understanding of problems, and I told him we're going to miss some of that, but we hope that he'll still stay involved.
I mean, Joe first became mayor, I think, in 1996, and almost from the beginning he's offered leadership. He's respected from Virginia Beach to Williamsburg, and that's because he was never just about Newport News. He said, Joe, we're going to miss you terribly. What a great asset, Joe, you've been to the region, and you know, we want you to stay involved. I mean, we need your institutional memory. We need, your vision for the future, and we need more of Joe, not less.
And we're happy to have the Honorable Joe Frank, Mayor of Newport News, with us tonight. Mayor, nice to have you here.
Good to be here.
Kind of nice to hear all those things while you're still alive, isn't it?
It's a wonderful thing.
It's a wonderful thing.
Beats the alternative.
Indeed so, indeed so. But those are your colleagues with whom you've served as mayor for many years. Of course, Mayor Jean Zeidler in Williamsburg announcing she will not be running for re-election either. So it really is a sort of a fundamental time in the history of the region. So I wonder, with 14 years under your belt, I know you want to spend time with your family. What's driving you to do this right now? Why? Because your wife has put up with this, as you noted, for a lot of years.
Well, there are a number of factors. First is I turned 67 in the middle of November. The job takes 60, 70, often 80 hours a week, every week of my life. I can't plan for my own life. It's planned for me. I'm fond of saying I can't make my own appointments. Secretary has to do that. My grandchildren have never known me other than as mayor.
Wow.
My wife points out that my youngest son was 14 when I started this journey. He'll be 40 in September. And while I still have my health and my energy and my strength, I think it's time to get control of my own life for a while and for my family. Try to make a living for a few years as long as I'm able to do that. And I've enjoyed every day of it. I've been fond of saying even the bad days have been good days because they afford opportunities to help other people and try to accomplish something. And
you've
I've
done that
enjoyed
your whole
it.
life. I mean, I'm looking at the course of your career, and we are talking specifically in this conversation about these 14 years as mayor, but your public service starts very, very early on. I found a picture of you that you were 13 years old when you became an Eagle Scout. That's awfully young to be an Eagle Scout, isn't it?
They told me I was the youngest Eagle Scout in the country when it happened. Whether it's true or not, I don't know, but I had completed all of the work so that all it took was to be the 13 or whatever to become an Eagle. But early on in our life, we organized kids in the community and did backyard things to raise money for cerebral palsy and kids with multiple sclerosis and that kind of thing. And you know, before I understood what it meant, I guess, I thought it's important to give to other people. And it's something that my parents instilled in me and my faith taught. And so it's been truly, I mean, it's easy to say, but truly it's been the joy of my life. Newport News and this region have been so good to me and my family, and we've prospered and thrived, gotten a great education. And so paying back is not a duty or a burden, but it is a responsibility. And, you know, those of us who have been fortunate enough to be able to do so, I think have an obligation to do so.
As I look at the city of Newport News in those 14 years, my goodness, what a different place it is. And you must, there must be some tremendous gratification in the fact that you look in certain parts of the city and they're developed in ways, I mean, and there's certainly detractors who say maybe it's too much, maybe it's not the right kind of development, but you can't deny the city is a different looking place than it was 14
Well,
years
you know,
ago.
I first got elected to city council in 1988. I became mayor in 1996, which is the 14 years you're referring to. But, you know, my goal in coming back from law school in 1967, I looked around and said, this community is too dependent on the shipyard, as important as the shipyard is and as significant as it is today, and huge economic generator for our community, as well as the military. And we are delighted to have the military, not only in Newport News, but throughout the region. People in the service are our neighbors and our friends and our family, and they contribute so much. But we needed to diversify our economy. We couldn't afford, in my opinion, to continue along the path that we had throughout our history, which was to be dependent on shipbuilding and the military. And so early on, I set about to do what I could do to make sure that we diversify the economy, the population, improve education, create new jobs, so that the community could grow and prosper. And when the young ones asked me, you know, what is my job about, I sort of tell them that it's about making a place to live where when you finish your education, you want to come back and live and raise your own children. And if you do that, then you deal with jobs and education and cultural opportunities and all of the other facets of building a community where people want to live and work and raise a family. And that's been the goal. And I've been very fortunate to have the opportunity to do those things. And people have been kind and supportive and encouraging. And so it's been, as I've said 3 times already, I think, a great joy.
But as you think about that joy over time, I mean, you can't be in public service that long between being on council and being mayor, and certainly all the public service that you did even before that. You can't be in public life without taking a few knocks. And I'm wondering, as you look back over that time in public service, where are I know it's been a joy, but there have to be moments where you say, maybe you don't say, what did I get myself into, but maybe you say, this day is not as good as some of the others have been. I mean, are there moments or developments over that period of time that you look back and say, that was a bad day?
Well, my mother used to have this phrase that went like, no sense, no feeling. And so I'm not sure how much I sense any of that. I stay pretty focused about where we need to go and how do we go about getting there. There have certainly been disappointments. Overwhelmingly, as I said, people have been encouraging and supportive and appreciative. This is not a job most people want to have.
That's the truth.
So when they have somebody that's devoting the time and effort and energy, studying the issues, trying to understand what it is that is happening and how you can affect that and impact on that and improve things, even if you make a bad decision, one that they don't like,
right.
If you explain it and if you articulate your reasons for why you did what you did, most folks, certainly not everybody, but most folks come to the conclusion that they support you for that, not because they necessarily agree, but because they think you're doing the best you can do. And given that, I think they become somewhat tolerant. So there have been some disappointing things. Not being able to conclude the King William Reservoir project successfully has been disappointing. It's a project that started back when I first got elected, and you know, I believe long-term, all of Virginia needs a long-term water supply, raw water supply, and there's not a comprehensive state program that does it, which leaves local communities to sort of fend for themselves, go through enormous regulatory processes to accomplish that kind of large-scale project. And the fact that we didn't was disappointing because I put a huge amount of time and effort and energy in doing that. Years ago, we were brought by the state an Aviation World's Fair that I prefer not to talk about, but it had, according to the state...
But it was an exciting idea at the time, right?
Well, it was sold as a great opportunity and a marvelous thing, and I suspect that the folks who investigated it didn't do their homework like they should, and it came clear after a while that the people who were bringing it to us didn't have the ability to make it happen, and we had to pull the plug, and a whole lot of political capital and revenues were committed to it. We did get a lasting benefit. We got a $30 million improvement at the airport that will benefit us over time. But, you know, I don't like failures. And so those were two that were certainly disappointing. Do I stay awake worrying about them at night? I don't.
You know, it seems to me that in this political world in which we find ourselves, and it's so much of our culture is sort of oriented this way, it seems that we put people under a lot of pressure to always make the right decision. And if you make the wrong decision, then by golly, there's an internet out there, and there's 700 newspaper articles. By golly, we can point back to those those moments. And I wonder, have you ever just had to say, you know what? I'm sorry, it was a mistake. It was the wrong decision, and we did the best, as you say, we did the best we could at the time. It was a wrong decision.
And I do that. I mean, I believe that what the public is really owed is honesty and integrity in government and in public service. And so if you make a mistake, I think you're obligated to say so. And I've tried to do that. There's no glory in trying to bluff your way through things. And people will lose confidence if they think if you're doing that. So I think being honest with people and telling them what you think and why you did what you did maintains confidence for the great majority of people.
I think that's one of the reasons that it's so tough on people who contemplate a run for public office these days. It's some of it's about the money that you have to raise, and some of it's about that intense scrutiny that the candidate goes through and that the family goes through. And I know this is a concern for you, who we get running for public office, and that we get sort of the best and the brightest.
It is, and it's increasingly difficult to do that. And that's not to say that there aren't excellent, caring people in government at all levels. But recruiting people for these jobs is really very difficult. First of all, the jobs themselves are complex, difficult. Decisions are often difficult to make. The information that's necessary is enormous. What you have to read and absorb and learn about. As a mayor, I mean, the subject matters that you deal with every day are complicated, whether it's dealing with the military and their issues, or homeland security, or water supplies, or airline service, or education, or roads. I mean,
You have to be an expert really quickly.
Every one of those things is complex and challenging, and you have to build relationships. It's not just what you know, but it's the relationships you build and who you know. Sometimes you get a lot more done by just knowing somebody and being able to have a candid conversation with them and getting help and assistance, and that's an important part of how you get this job done.
When you talk about relationships, I'm reminded of the fact, and lots of people have talked about this, that one of the things that made Newport News, has made Newport News successful for many years is your leadership, an effective council, and an effective city manager. And Randy Hildebrand was the city manager who was voted out on a 4-3 council vote, which some say sort of was the harbinger that that maybe you were not going to have what you would have determined as effective a council going forward. I wonder what that experience was like, considering how long you had worked with Mr. Hildebrand, and what...
Well, the decision was certainly disappointing, and it'd be less than candid if I didn't say that. But, you know, managers work at the pleasure of City Council, and they have to have a working relationship with the council. And if a council doesn't believe that the manager, whoever he is, and no matter how good their skills and technical competencies are and knowledge base is, feel that that person is not meeting their particular needs, they have every right to find somebody who they're more comfortable with. And while I was perfectly comfortable with Mr. Hildebrand, and I thought he was competent and a real professional, and he handled his job very effectively, others disagreed. And so you respect those kinds of opinions, and it truly is an interpersonal kind of thing. I mean, council people, like all elected people, and leaders in every walk of life, have their own personalities. And they have their strengths and their weaknesses and their points of view and perspectives. And you know, the manager works for the city council. That's who hires them, that's who fires them, that's who determines their compensation and the relationships. And if they're not comfortable with a relationship, then they're perfectly entitled to get someone who is. And so I respect that, although I frankly was personally disappointed in the process and in the outcome.
One of the other things I know over time I've observed that you care very deeply about is the issue of race relations in the city. And I know you've done a lot of work with the People-to-People organization to try to get at some of those issues, which it seems to me is probably one of the most effective tools I've seen so far for bringing people at least into conversation around what are very, very challenging issues. Yeah. So as you look back over your career, I wonder what observations you would make about your role in that and what work remains to be done.
Well, you know, in this country, and I think wrongly people think this is just an issue in the South, but in this country, race relations have been a issue that has had to be addressed at virtually every turn and every level. Whether it's employment opportunities, whether it's compensation, whether it's access to housing, whether it's being able to build into predominantly minority neighborhoods the infrastructure and the services that they require for their own lives, food and health care and banking institutions and all of that. It's a continuing struggle. And I think we've made huge progress over the years, I truly do. But I also believe that there's a lot more that needs to be done and has to be done. And, you know, to be candid with you, and some may criticize me for saying this, but again, it's my view of the truth. You know, the Obama election, I think, has redivided some people. And I think there are people who are using that to separate people.
What do you mean redivided?
Well, I think that over the years there's been some division between African Americans and whites and other minorities that we've all tried to bring together and resolve and find cooperative ways to work together for the common good. And I think that a lot of the criticism of the president has something to do with his race. And I think those are, it's unfortunate, but I think some people who are in public life today are trying to capitalize on that.
We've just got about a minute and a half left, and I wonder, I go back to the conversation we started the program with the mayors, Mayor Zeidler, Mayor Frame, Clyde Huey, those folks who were talking about the intellectual capital that you've brought to this and the fact that you were always thoughtful, well prepared for the meetings, and looked at Newport News as a piece of the region or as a critical part of the region. So if that level of preparation is what is incumbent upon elected officials to deal with these important issues, what do you think is incumbent upon citizens in Hampton Roads?
You know, people tend to be very parochial. They're concerned about their families and their neighborhoods and their schools. It takes a lot to get people to engage the scope of their interest beyond those core things, their job. Yet, we all live in this global economy. We live in this global society, to be candid, in my view. And we're all interrelated in ways that many people just don't understand. And we need to learn better how to work together more effectively. Used to be that Newport News would compete for jobs with Hampton or the Peninsula with Southside. We can't afford that luxury. Our competition is Japan and India and Italy and places around the world that some folks don't know where is. And so trying to focus regionally to solve our problems, you know, crime doesn't honor jurisdictional lines. Air quality issues don't confine themselves to one jurisdiction or another. Water quality, sewage disposal, you know, all of those small level issues as well as the huge ones. Economic commerce and trade and the ports. So people need to spend a little time getting better educated about what the requirements are of the world they live in, whether it's the environment and whether it's air quality or global warming. Those are issues that people are going to have to deal with and their children are going to have to live with.
We sure are, no question about it. Well, the pit bull in wingtips, as a Commerce Secretary once referred to you. Thank you so much for being with us and for all of your years of service. I know that you're going to have a great time traveling with your older grandchildren and your wife and doing some traveling after June 30th. So
looking forward to that.
I think you'll have to learn how to set your own schedule, but I think you can handle it. Okay. I think you can handle it. Thanks, Mayor Frank.
Thank you.
I'll be back in a moment with a final thought. In a job like mine, you get to know the mayors of the 7 cities pretty well. And in the case of Joe Frank, I really didn't get to know him well until Hurricane Isabel. That was back in 2003 when the region was hit hard by a storm that some say wasn't even a real hurricane, just a zesty tropical storm. But it did more damage than any storm we've seen in recent memory. Those of you who were here at the time probably remember you may have spent up to 2 weeks without power. Well, my memory of Joe Frank is that of one angry mayor, and he had good reason to be. On our public radio station, he was in what I would call a controlled rage. We've asked for generators. We haven't gotten them, he said. We've asked for water, ice, food. We haven't seen any of it. Finally, he had to hire trucks to haul in ice from Tennessee and Alabama. The director of the federal agency charged with response was defensive instead of being helpful. We've distributed ice down to that area, he said. I just find it difficult to believe that we're not meeting someone's needs, if indeed they've been articulated. Well, if there's one thing that's for sure, it's that no one has ever accused Joe Frank of not being able to articulate anything. And he was pretty clear in this case. What played out in Isabel, it turns out, was a minor league case of what would become a major league disaster 2 years later when Hurricane Katrina devastated New Orleans. Here's the irony. The agency head on the defensive in Isabel, the same one at the helm during the federal foul-up in Katrina. None other than FEMA Director Mike Brown, the man who definitely did not do a heck of a job in either case. If you'd like to look at tonight's show or any of the others that we've brought to you in the past, you can visit our website, whatmatters.tv. There you'll also find ways to get in touch with us. You can drop us an email or join us on our Facebook page. You can also sign up for our weekly newsletter, and we'll be happy to let you know what we're working on in the weeks ahead. I also hope you'll join us for our weekday call-in show on the radio dial. It's Hearsay on 89.5 WHRV. And if you join us, you can listen in live at noon for what we hope is great conversation there as well. Thanks again for watching. I'm Cathy Lewis, and we'll see you next time for another look at what matters.